NVK, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, man. It's been a while.
Yeah, and obviously lots happening. Hardware stuff is going on. I wanted to obviously chat about the new Q1 device, of course. I think that'll be the main thing to chat about. But yeah, and all the ordinal stuff and Nostr and all this crazy stuff. But look, let's start with Q1. I think that's what people want to hear first. So can you tell us a little bit about the Q1 device?
Yeah, so essentially we made the device that we've been wanting to make a QWERTY, so a full keyboard hardware wallet for many, many years. And we've been sort of like prototyping and experimenting with it for a long time. And we just couldn't find a reason to sort of like make it economically speaking by just adding a keyboard kind of thing. Since I still think the majority of the market is going to want the MK4 because it is like smaller and sort of like, thinner, cheaper kind of thing. But there was one small breakthrough. We found a camera module that used to be expensive, but like sort of like it became economically viable as a product. And the same with a bigger screen. So we're like, okay, great. So let's start designing a keyboard, right? So like this is everything in this product is kind of like from scratch, right? It's not like we're using a sort of like a store bought sort of like a keyboard or anything like that. But anyways, so I wanted to make this device for a very long time, and stars align kind of thing, and we made it. So wow, we made it. We're making it. It's still going to be quite a few months. I mean, we hope to ship out this year. If there is no sort of like supply chain sort of like surprises, we should be able to.
Are we talking like mid this year, late this year?
I think the risk is having to do more iterations on the plastic mold.
Yeah.
If it comes out right, which it should, because we're using the same plastic, we kind of like know our stuff already well for this. But there's always oh no, like the clip for this doesn't do just quite right. We need to update the mold kind
Right.
of thing, right?
Yeah.
If that does happen, then like that pushes a month, pushes 2 months, pushes 3 months, kind of thing. Uh, but aside from that, there's not a lot of unknowns. We are using the same sort of like architecture as Mark IV, right? So it's the same MCU, same secure elements. If between now and then new chips come out, new interesting secure elements come out, it's possible we integrate that in. So because we already have prototypes of this stuff running, right? Like it's all sort of like good. But because it's long enough time, and the Mark IV sort of design is already very well understood by us. It shouldn't be too hard to like add new secure elements and a few other cool things there.
Awesome.
Um,
Yeah. And so
yeah.
I guess in terms of the highlights then for the new device, it's got QR code, which is obviously the big thing. And it still retains the NFC and it's got
Yes.
two SD card slots. And it's also got a screen. And so then the idea is just like the QR scanning devices that are already out there on the market, you're now able to offer a
Yeah.
QR code
So,
signing.
so I think it's two things, right? Like two big things on this. Like one is a big screen, right? Like we want to be able to do other sort of interesting UX things. So like having a bigger screen is great. You can display bigger QR codes as well with more data in them. I really dislike animated QRs. They're terrible for people to read. Um, but they might still be needed. We're still sort of like, studying kind of, and this is software, right? So it's easy to update and sort of change and improve. And I think we need a better animated QR spec. So maybe we work on that too if we have time. Um, so that's that part on the QR, right? Another thing too is that we couldn't find a touch screen that was safe to use because they have like a lot of proprietary stuff going on in them. So for now it's going to be this kind of screen, right? And then on the QR part, the scanner, um, we don't like the idea of using normal cameras shooting that unfiltered data straight into the processor, right? That's how most hardware wallets do that. Because, like your private key is in memory on the MCU and you're receiving all that random data in there. It's not hard to see an exploit that tries to do buffer overflow, right, on the MCU or some other kinds of attack. And your private key is in memory at the same place as the stuff is happening, right? It's also like they don't read well, like the screen. That's why we wanted to wait to see if ever this QR modules would come to the market with a price that's economically viable. This is very similar to like supermarket scanners, the hand scanners. So it's a module that all it does is read QRs, barcodes, all that stuff, right? So technically we could do barcode seeds now too. It's very good at reading. Like you point, it reads. Like, like there's no sort of fiddling. It's just, it's like hungry for QRs kind of thing. It has that vibe, right? And what we do is we pipe, it talks serial port with the MCU, right? So it's a much more narrow protocol to talk to. The data's coming is very, very sort of like specific type, right? So it's a lot better security threshold. I think Flaxman brought this up way back in one of his episodes, that was a concern. So in our view is also a concern, and we wanted to address that if we were going to make this. The module itself is like, closed manufacturer, like sort of like, it's their own crap in there. But because of this separation, right, this essentially firewall through serial, it's okay, right? So that's nice. Another thing that sort of like we've always debated was to do like alkaline batteries versus lithium batteries. I'd like to have a device that's future proof, so you don't depend on battery packages. It does make the device thicker. Again, like, I like to say, like, this designed for us, right? Like, it's kind of like a bulky device, and we think it's pretty cool, and we don't think people should walk around with hardware wallets anyways. So, like, the pocket is not where you put your hardware wallet, right? So anyway, so it does have 3 AAAs, so that should last enough time if you don't use the flashlight a lot. The flashlight is part of the QR module. So we figure, hey, why not add a button to turn on the flashlight as well? A lot of people who are in this space understand why this is kind of important. Many people keep these devices in safes, like actual good safes, in sort of like in places that may not be as well lit. And most very good safes won't have lights inside. Because they don't have like power going in or anything like that. So you have to use the battery ones, and those die. Or safe deposit box sometimes is not well lit. So it sounds silly, but it's actually very useful. What else? So the lithium ion battery packs, I think they're like pretty cool. They're nice power density as well. One of my fears with them is because they're opaque packages, like you could put some malicious crap in there that, I don't know, like radios to the nearby office when the thing is on, kind of thing. Not hard to develop that. But, like it's a little bit like it gets into the paranoid sort of tinfoil hat attack surface, which is where we live, but...
Right, but I think there's also a standardness of like just having AAA batteries. Everyone knows where to get them, and it's very stock standard. You can go to like a convenience store and buy the batteries, and off you go.
Like, I mean, listen, I'm not going to pigeonhole ourselves, right? I mean, it's not impossible that, like, I don't know, the next version maybe uses like a lithium package inside the case sealed or something. Yeah. We're experimenting. Like this is something we wanted to make because we wanted to make. Like Mark 1, I'm a little surprised at how many people want it. I mean, the pre-sales were a little crazier than I thought. So I guess there is a demand for a mountain man device.
Right, that looks like a BlackBerry. You know, maybe
That's
people
right.
just want a BlackBerry, and it's like an expensive flashlight also, and
Yeah,
it
I mean, like,
becomes part of the
you want to type out your passphrases, right? Like fast.
Yeah.
And even though like a touchscreen would have been great, I can't do that safely yet, at least. So might as well put a QWERTY there. Another very cool thing is there's a button there that looks like a tab button. It's like a stick and an arrow together. That button is going to be for expanding passphrases. Sorry, like a BIP39 words, so like you can just like autocomplete. There's a lot of like little things that we want to play around with.
Oh, cool. So that's like the calculate the 24th word scenario.
Or just expand from the 2 words, show me the next ones kind of thing, you know?
I see.
Yeah.
Like autocomplete sort of thing. Yeah,
exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Yeah. And certainly being able to type in your passphrase, because right now if you're clicking around, that can take a little bit of time. But, there is all of these things. It is a trade-off, right? And you have to think about all of these aspects, right? The price point. So I guess now in terms of CoinKite's range, you would say, like, you've got kind of at the cheaper end, you have the Sats card, which is kind of like an open dime. Then you have the tap signer, which is more like a $40 tap signer sort of start level. And then I guess going up, you have the Coldcard Mark IV, which is about $148, something like that. And then this one, I think the pre-order was $199, right? So
yeah, and we hope to keep it within that. Like the design was very deliberate, right? So the reality is, like, the normies are coming, right?
Yeah.
And like, any market, like, I mean, price is like one of the biggest drivers, right? There is a reason why Ledger is one of the best sellers in this market. It's like price is huge, right? And every maker seems to kill their very high expensive devices, right? Remember, like Ledger Blue, I think was called. It was like 600 euros. It was very nice. Had some issues because it was prototype, but it doesn't go anywhere. We think that like 200-ish is like as far as you can go when the next bull run comes and the market sort of like really comes in. And so we designed this with like economies of scale that we already have on chip purchases, right? So it's using the same MCU. There's like a lot of cool things there that are similar. And you get all the security, right? So like, I don't know, like I think it should be a slum dunk in terms of like capturing the people that want a device that's a bit bigger, that does things that they want to do. Yeah, it's exciting. I can't wait to like have a proper production test on my hands to do stuff with it.
Right, yeah. And the bigger screen, I think, is going to be useful as well, especially for people who want to do more advanced things, right? Like you were saying, you're going to have mini script. People might want to do multi-sig and then verify, which are the other XPubs in this setup. Right now, you can do that, but you're scrolling through in terms of the multi-sig.
Address Explorer is huge.
Yeah, that too.
Right. We're not like, so one thing we don't want to do is make like sort of like a true sort of like color GUI, sort of like too much of that stuff. Like we still want to keep it sort of like within sort of like a simple, concise, textual based UX, right? Like, we might add a thing here and there. And maybe in the future is more like a like a interactive command line kind of thing, like where you have like maybe a pop-up or something. Sorry. But we do want to keep it sort of like simple, concise, focus on the actual data as opposed to a bunch of like pretty crap around. So multi-sig, it's gonna be nice. The Address Explorer would be nice to have a big screen, more data on QRs. We could have more soft UI things on the UI as well. Yeah, it's nice. More real estate is always better.
And I presume there's going to be some familiarity for people who are already Coldcard Mark IV users.
Yeah.
It'll be sort of similar in how you use it.
I mean, unless we have a lot of time, which I don't think we will, It's gonna likely be a scaled up version of the existing UI with improvements to actually fit on the screen and sort of like be nice, right? But it's gonna start as an extension of that, as an improvement of that, and then just iterative sort of like improve that. Because like, even though Mark IV has a tiny screen, I think the UX on it, as much as like, you can get some criticism because it's not as, easy or whatever, because it's not touch, right? It's the kind of UX that prevents you from losing money, right? Like my priority is make sure that that UX like really sort of keeps you from screwing up, as instead of just like make sure that you have like, a one tap sign, right? Like for that, use your phone, right? Like, I mean, like people are sending and receiving like part of their savings here, right? So, the mindset really is like, how can I prevent you from losing money, right? So that's sort of like where our head is at.
Yeah, sure. And I think the focus as well on air gapping, so that's also something that is there quite strongly with the SD card and the QR code. I think, as I understand as well from your earlier comments as well, it seems that the more interactivity there is, it's like you're losing the air gap in a way, right? So maybe that's why Bluetooth doesn't really count as an air gap. Probably NFC doesn't really strictly count as an air gap either. So really it's like SD card or QR code. And then that just has... Go on.
I think, like... But even on the QR side, like if you're sending straight to the MCU, like I guess it's like it's a big gray space, right? Like at a minimum there is no wires. Like that's number one, right? Like no wires that do data, and then that's true where like that's the beginning of air gap, right? And then radios, absolutely, right? Like I mean, if they are complex radios or whatever, yes, right? Like they are not air gap, even though there is an air gap. It's kind of funny. So yes, so like Bluetooth is a definitely no, Wi-Fi is a definitely no, right? Like these are complex, long distance sort of like radio types, right? NFC sort of like, it's not air gap technically, but it kind of is, like it's you have to be super close to it. It's very easy to sort of like segregate yourself from other things because the radio, the way it works, it's kind of fine, but it's not really air gap. So it's kind of like in the middle there. And then like, you have the QR next, right? Like the camera next, which is like, yes, is air gap. There is a few sort of concerns. I think we addressed them with the serial. And then to me, like, then there is SneakerNet. SneakerNet is like the best way of doing air gap for the true paranoid. When like when you still need to shuffle data back and forth, right? I mean, like that is sort of like the best you can do.
Right. And
so
because
that's the scale.
Yeah. I think that's fair as well. I think people, like, one of the criticism is this idea that, even with an SD card, you're putting in another computer inside and all this. But even there, I mean, it's sort of like, you have to use something. You're going to have to use...
One is nobody has demonstrated an attack of SD card in all these years. Two is you can just dispose SD cards, have a pile, all fresh. You know what I mean? Like, and it's like, okay, so like, you just keep on tossing them out, right? Like, who cares? And then it's not as much of a concern because even though, like, let's say the most advanced Stuxnet figured out how to do something there, right? You can still use a fresh new card to take the data out.
Right. So the idea is that you would have it saved to the device, change out the SD card, and then put a new SD card in to take the saved SD card, saved PSVT out, and use that to input into
and
the
also
computer,
like you could be sending that to a computer that's also offline, right? And then from that computer you can do another hop if you want to. Also, like, listen, this is not like SD cards like cameras read SD cards, right? Like there's a reason why it's a max 32 gigabyte SD card. So this is the narrow set of the SD cards, the old school FAT32 kind of SD cards. It's very narrow. We are using this in a very narrow way. The way we don't just execute data from the SD card. Like it's not simple. There is a lot of nuance there. I think a lot of it is just like simple FUD from ignorance.
Right. And I think personally, I like to use it as part of a multi-signature, like if you're talking about serious money, but I understand you have your criticisms of let's say, I would say it's fair, like beginners should be maybe using a guided service, whether it's Unchained or someone, get an expert or professional to help you.
Yeah.
And then, for the more advanced users, keep it simple, but, I think if you want to learn multi-signature, you can, but you kind of have to be very slow and methodical and precise about your backups and your keeping a copy of your output descriptor and all of these aspects of it also to kind of make it actually a more secure setup. So the way I'm viewing it is, if you're talking about like your big HODL stack and, you have maybe an MK4 and like a Q1 and maybe some other devices as part of your overall quorum, well, the whole point is that you're making it harder and harder and harder for somebody to realistically, take your coins, obviously.
I always say multi-sig is fantastic. The problem with multi-sig is the complexity for the amount of money that the average plebe is going to put on, right? Like it's stupid. For most people, the great majority of the people, right? Like single sig plus passphrase is like an amazing, perfect solution, right? Like, well, perfect between quotes, right? And then there's people who have a lot more money, right? Like, and for those people, like spending the money and the time to learn about multi-sig or find a collaborative multi-sig or something, and audit, right? Because like, listen, if you have $100 million to keep, right? Like you're not going to just trust any of these collaborative solutions either. You're going to want to like hire people to do diligence on them too. So like nothing is simple, right? And I think we're finally like past the point now where like Bitcoiners can be a little bit more grown up and sort of like have nuance over custody. So like we're not just on Twitter just saying, like 12 DVDs, right? Like it's like, let's have nuance, right? Like people have different piles, people are different locations, they have different needs, different security thresholds. So yeah.
Yeah, cool. So let's chat about the Coldcard firmware. I know there's been some recent updates on that. I know the recent version, for example, has the output descriptor export for single signature wallets. So that's kind of an interesting one because I know this is something the guys over in Bitcoin Core have been pushing descriptors as the new way, and it seems that now the hardware and the software are starting to adopt descriptors. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
We've been descriptor pushers since the beginning. As soon as actually before descriptors came to Core, we already had implemented it.
Nice.
It's a much safer way for people to do backups than just the BIP39 or writing down your derivation path or your script type or all that stuff. So yeah, output descriptors are amazing. It's a shame that very, very few wallets support it. I think at the moment is just Coldcard. Hang on, I have a little website here, outputdescriptors.org. So Bitcoin Core, Coldcard, Spectre, Desktop, Sparrow Wallet, Nunchuck, Moon, Blue Wallet, and BTC Pay Server, and Bitcoin and BDK. That's it. So Coldcard is the only hardware. So Salvatore, that keeps on badgering me to do miniscript. Do output descriptors first, sir.
I thought I'm not sure. Maybe they do have that now. I think maybe that for their new miniscript stuff.
I don't think they do. It's just miniscript. I don't think they do output descriptors.
Oh, I thought that. Yeah, okay. I'd have to check.
Let's just say that so he gets some shit, and then if it's true, then I'll eat some crow on Twitter after.
Okay. Yeah.
Just so the people listening. Yeah, we're all friendly around this stuff. Like we're all.
Well, I know he was pestering you for miniscript,
yes.
So you can get him back for one.
Fair.
Yeah. And so I saw also in the recent firmware update, there's micro SD card as second factor. So I guess this is again like you can have your different models. Like and that's the other thing, right? Like let's say I'm a malicious person and I'm coming after you. I don't necessarily know what your setup is, right? I don't know if you're doing seed XOR. I don't know if you've got a DureS pin, if you have a BrickMe pin, if you have a SD card as your second factor, if you have multi-signature, if you're using a passphrase, if you're using a combo of these things. Like, it's all, people, I think that's
It's a
part of the
labyrinth.
idea, right?
Yeah. So my idea is when a bad guy knocks on the door, he looks at a cold card, he cries, right? Because it's like, okay, I really don't know how to approach this person, right? Because like he can have infinite trick pins, and sort of like it's a big labyrinth of like plausibly deniable things, right? So anyway, so like a lot of people are lazy and don't want to like remember trick pins or do that. And so like my idea is, hey, why don't we use a microSD? And I think it was somebody else who seeded this idea in my head about a year ago. I can't remember who was. Why don't we use a microSD card, the serial of the actual card, right? That's in the chip, which is clonable, but it doesn't matter in this scenario, to be the second factor when you log in. So if that microSD card is not in the Coldcard when you boot, okay, the Coldcard could do different things, like a trick pin, right? It could brick, it could erase the seed, and I think like a few other sort of other options on the trick pins. It's very cool because like you can have it around. All microSDs kind of look the same, right? So nobody's gonna know which one is what. And yeah, if anybody turns it on without you being around, right? Like kind of like an Evo made scenario. They won't know that like moving forward on that could destroy the device, even if they took your pin. Let's say they had a camera right behind you or something. They've been watching you. If they have the pin now, they wouldn't be able to follow through, even if the correct pin.
Yeah, there's just so many different options.
Yeah, which is not true for the trick pins, right? The trick pins, they're great, but if somebody had a camera and they were watching you closely, right, they could figure out which one is the correct pin, right? With this one is pretty cool. You really get that extra security there, and you can travel away with your SD card, and it's kind of like nobody can get in, right? Like while you were away without you taking the cold card.
Right. And meanwhile, of course, in some other location, you would have the backup of that. So let's say you accidentally
always
have
a backup, right? I mean, backups are a given, right? Like,
and
ideally, if you're using SIG, you do seed XOR on your backup.
Yeah. And I think it's funny because obviously, not a criticism of you here, obviously, but it's like we're talking about all these kind of like ways to make your stuff more secure, but then like some of these hacks you hear about are people just, keeping their keys in the cloud or keeping their keys on a hot server.
No. Yeah, but like this is not our target market. Like this is something we've noticed, like especially through the years now. The people who contact us for issues when like it's more the dark stuff, or like like husband complicated things too much or whatever. But we don't have a lot of users who gave away their seeds on a DM or took a picture of their seed and put it on their iCloud, right? This is more like a ledger mass market problem than for us. I mean, we have a lot.
Though I wonder, maybe the question is, maybe once you become bigger, like once Coldcard becomes bigger and bigger, maybe that you do start to get those more mass market questions. So I guess 100%. Maybe it's a growing thing.
Yeah, it is, and we see some of those with TapSigner. Where people are a little bit more confused. That's why we try to make it like idiot proof, right? Like for example, the backups go encrypted to your cloud thing, right? Like it's like we try to make it so that you can't screw yourself even if you really wanted to. Although like never underestimate people trying to lose their money. But it's.
And that's the reality, There are people who will just take things and just screw around with them and just completely... Even people from, like, supposedly professional occupations, even people like a pilot or things like this, who are meant to be very reliable and very sturdy or very, reliable, basically. They will just screw around with things and just totally, I think sometimes all of us can just be stupid or do dumb things
Yeah,
at
like
times. So,
listen, that's why like good security setups don't require you to think, right? Because see, like we can have even like a core dev like who's like super knowledgeable, shadowy super coder, right? Like lose his money because he made a custom setup that like he didn't pay attention that day, right? Like everybody has a bad day, right? And it could be that one bad day where I don't know, like say like you have a margin like contract that you like you're super stressed and you have to deal with that, or you broke like I don't know, like you had a fight with your spouse or something, right? You're like super stressed and you go to your setup and you need to do a transaction because of the time of something, right? And if you have to think too much, like you just have like this massive attack surface now for you to like screw yourself. Maybe you have your Cubes OS laptop, all set up, and then you accidentally stick in the wrong the long USB stick on it, and that one just happened to have like, an exploit. Like you don't want to, you want to be in a place where like you're a lot like, safer from yourself, because people have bad days.
yeah, and I guess that's challenging as well online, even as you mentioned. I guess I guess there's two examples, right? If Cubes, I'm thinking of Peter Todd there, but in the example of keeping the server online, I mean that's like Luke, right? With Luke and the story there, because people were coming out saying this stuff like, oh, see, even if a core developer can't keep his coin secure, what chance does the average person have? But it could also just be that he was using a very out of date setup, and yeah.
Think about it this way, like just because people are an expert on some things doesn't make them an expert on other things.
Yeah.
Like I talked to Luke a bit, like, and we sent him some cold cards. The reality is, like, I mean, since hardware wallets came out, right, even unideal setups, right, like people have been robbed a lot less, right? So like I like to say, right, like any hardware wallet is better than no hardware wallet. I mean, provided they're from the, say, like bitcoin.org list of hardware wallets, right? Like I'm not talking about like, all those closed crap around that like support 50,000 shitcoins that, like you don't know the team or whatever. But like, out of say like Coldcard, Trezor and like Ledger, like you're pretty well taken care of, right? So, like you can't like depend on having a specific vintage of an IBM laptop that just happened to have the right chipset. You know what I mean? Like, and like maintaining some complex, like, it's unrealistic, right? And then you die, right? And now your spouse has to deal with this like complete like stupid setup, right? We need better, right? We need reasonable, right? And then we need to sort of like improve on that.
Yeah, and I think the challenge is keeping it secure, but also keeping it simple. And that's, I think, trying to find things that can give people simple and secure is really the goal. And I think what some people end up doing, unfortunately, is they overcomplicate because they think it's going to make them more secure. But the real skill is keeping it simple and secure at the same time. So that's interesting. And I think, one other firmware feature I've noticed is this ephemeral seeds one. Now, I know it's something maybe from the prior firmware update, but I know it's kind of an interesting one. So the idea is that you can import another seed and use that as part of, or inside this one device. And so it's, I guess... Yeah, is it kind of like, it's almost like a seed signer then, isn't it? Kind of like a seed signer functionality.
Yeah. So we added that because I needed to help a friend sweep a reasonably size stash from a seed, right? And I didn't want to load that on computers, or not in the mood of like setting up some crazy setup, and so and the whole thing was like a new Coldcard was not available. Let's put it this way, in that situation. So like this is what essentially he needed. I sort of like did some thought on this, and I figured, hey, like why don't we just load like seeds on Coldcard in read only mode, and don't erase the stored seed, right? So like you have your Coldcard stored seed, but I wanted to load extra seeds so that it could export a Electrum skeleton file so that he can then go create the transaction and sign it with that secure Coldcard. And essentially, like, so that a lot of people sometimes need to transfer old wallets to a new wallet, right? But they only have a single hardware wallet, and they are in, like in some place somewhere in the world where they can't get anything else fast enough. So there was that kind of situation. So being able to load in a seed ephemerally, right, like just temporarily on memory for you to spend it out, it's a good solution. It's like really, really nice way of spending or exporting sometimes just a read only, because you export your read only, you put it in your computer or whatever, and then you can just forget that seed. So yeah, very useful so that you can have last Coldcards in case you need some of that. The seed's other model, I think it's great for multi-sig. I don't like it for single sig. I'm kind of very vocal about it. I don't think people should be touching private key material on a daily basis. Even though you can do that now with Coldcard, I don't recommend it. Because, if you have your private keys available to you in your house, like, what's the point of having a hardware wallet? Like, somebody's going to come and hit you and take it. And, your phone camera could accidentally see it, right? Like, it's just, there's a million ways in which you can screw yourself with that. And in their model, I think the problem is you can't guarantee that it was erased either, due to the design hardware nature of that. But I think it's very cool for multi-sig. I think it's very cool for recovering or transferring from a specific seed. So that was sort of like the idea of it. So now you support it. It's there.
Yeah, that's cool. And I think, it makes sense for users who maybe don't have new devices around. And I think it's probably, like you're saying, it's probably useful in the case where you want to help a friend. And because the general dictum, the general advice is never type your seed words into a hot computer for a large stack, right? Maybe for smaller stacks, you're okay, you're comfortable with that risk, but for a large stack, you just don't do that. And if you don't have a new device on hand, then that's where having this ephemeral seed feature can be useful for you. I guess presumably this would be more like a last resort feature, though. It's kind of like a recovery and then send out into somebody's new setup as an example, because, maybe that friend of yours is not going to trust that your device is actually, that it is ephemeral. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because there's always going to be that, that fear that once you type it in.
You're in the middle of the desert somewhere, right? You cannot get a wallet. You've learned that your original seed may be compromised because the backup got compromised. And you're in a pinch. You want to transfer from the old one to the new one using the same device. It's a great way of handling that. Another thing that happens, and I had to do this a few times, is, you have like a phone wallet. And it's not like a lot of coin, but it's enough that you don't want to put it on a computer. And you want to sweep those keys. This is a great way of doing that. You put the seed in and you sweep those phone keys, even though maybe you don't use that phone wallet anymore, you don't trust it or whatever reason. That's kind of nice. So yeah, that's the idea. It's like using the Coldcard as your sort of like seed management sort of like solution.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, and it might be useful in different ways that come or become more obvious in the future. And so I think coming back to that idea of simple and secure, and just kind of zooming out a little bit in terms of Bitcoin and security in general, right? Because obviously you and I and probably many listeners, we want more people to be able to use Bitcoin securely. Like, we want that. We want more people, to join us. And so I think that also brings this whole question about changes in Bitcoin and things like op vault as an example. So obviously our friend James OB has been talking about that and helping trying to explain what it does, how it helps. That's just an example, right? Another example I like is any prev out. So for me personally, I think conceptually, I'm not a developer that I've reviewed all the code of them, but conceptually, I like the idea of these because they help us scale Bitcoin, or they help us self-custody Bitcoin, or make it more feasible for people to do that. But on the other hand, and I appreciate this, we have to also be conservative, and we shouldn't just willy-nilly change things. So where do we land on that? Like, how does one shepherd a change through in Bitcoin, given the community and the culture and all of that?
Oh my God, that's like a 2-hour conversation, maybe 10-hour conversation. We did 2 hours of upvote at the Bitcoin Review pod, my thing there with Antoine and James and Ben Cartman. And like, again, like, you know, and we still didn't get to, like, it's just a long conversation. But I think covenants of some kind will need to happen. So that's first, right? Like, we have no choice. One covenant solution is going to have to happen. CTV was sort of galaxy brain, super cool, interesting, but like beyond the comprehension of like most people can even fathom in terms of like possibilities and things. So like that makes it too scary because we don't know what could go wrong and stuff. Even though a lot of work was done in sort of proving it safe, but I don't know. I'm not comfortable with it personally. And then Brian Bishop's vaults like don't work because you can't prove an ephemeral seed was deleted. So like that was just cool, sort of like speculative work kind of thing, but you know, it's not viable, right? There was one more I can't remember now. And then there's upvote by James. Like James is, you know, a legit sort of like core person, right? He knows what he's doing. He knows what he's talking about. He's done some deep research on this. The paper is actually quite straightforward. It's a narrow primitive. So it's a new Bitcoin primitive, upvote. It's very narrow, which is nice. So less sort of like possible issues, less possible attack surface, or just bug surface. And upvote creates like a very sane way of doing some basic types of covenants, which gets very complicated fast to explain on you know, whatever, like 15-20 minutes that we have left here. So what I'd say is like we're gonna need something. James is not married to this. He's gonna a BIP is coming out probably like imminent, so that people can start to sort of like the debate on it. Let's put it this way. And so he's not married to this. If something else comes out that's like better, simpler, and sort of works, then so be it, right? Like, but we need something, and we need something soon. As you know, I am an Ossify kind of guy for Bitcoin, right? But like when I mean Ossify, it's not that like software won't be changed ever again, right? Like, and I think a lot of people who are not technical don't understand this. Even ossified software needs gardening, right? Yeah. And I'm trying to introduce this concept of gardening to people so they understand. We talked a lot on that episode about it, where you need to update the software because computers change, the attack surface changes, right? Like we have the Unix bug, you know, that's going to have to get fixed.
Or I think a really good example is the Tor v2 deprecation in favor of Tor v3. Like Bitcoin Core had to change. If if we didn't have that change, you wouldn't be able to use Bitcoin with Tor. So
I mean, you know, uptime verify, lock time verify was added. Nobody even blink an eye. Just sort of got, you know, like nobody even talked about it, right? Like
maybe it's just like earlier times, you know, there was less scrutiny, or maybe it was the network was smaller, or I don't know.
No, that was after that was after SegWit, if I remember right, wasn't it?
No, CLTV. I think that was they were pre-SegWit. CLTV and CSV.
That's right. That was yes, but that was after the P2SH like wars.
Yeah, I think so.
Right. Like, and then there was the return wars, and then there was the original block size wars. You know, Bitcoin was 32 megabytes blocks, and then it went down to 1. Right. Satoshi just changed that, and then we went to 4. Like the thing is like, things will change, right? We want to strive and sort of target and trend towards almost no changes, especially with new features. But like new things will come and they're going to be necessary. So I think people need to sort of like start thinking about Bitcoin that way, that there will be things. It was not Taproot that added dick butts to the blockchain, right? It was the SegWit discount and the extra for like 4x increasing block size. So it was the block size that made the big blocks.
Yeah, specifically the
right?
witness discount, right? But
Yeah, well,
even there, yeah.
But the blocks were made for megabytes, right? And
Right.
the idea is blocks should be full. So you should be angry at the block size, not at the dick butts. I mean, it's because it was already possible to add all those inscriptions and things into Bitcoin before that. And with enough fiddling, he could probably have done that, like, even before the discount too. It's just a discount.
I mean, it was always possible, right? The question is
Exactly.
more just like the cost to do it, right? So I think some people have been unfairly saying, "Oh, Taproot is to blame," which is clearly wrong, right? It's not the fault of Taproot that now there's inscriptions on Bitcoin. It was possible pre-SegWit. It was possible even pre-P2SH.
It's just it made it straightforward. Right?
Right.
Like, because the Taproot witness doesn't have, like, it has a discount, but it doesn't have a limit. Like the witness for normal transactions does have a limit on the script size, right? So that there is that, but it was already possible. It just wasn't possible this straightforward. Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
I do think one amazing thing might come out of this. I think that data compression on blocks is going to be much more advancedly thought through because of this. So we might actually get some benefits out of this, aside from having pictures on the blockchain, which that's sort of like a moral sort of issue and whatever. Like I'm not going to get into this in the short time, but
yeah.
So,
but yeah, I mean,
anyways.
I guess bringing it back to the point really that there may be some people who just don't want to change at all. But I think if we want Bitcoin to be available to more people and we want more people to be comfortable with it, I think things like Upvolt, personally, I would be pro Upvolt. I would like to see people support these ideas so that we can make Bitcoin more accessible. But crucially, of course, we want to make sure everything is safe before we bring anything in.
So like, long-winded road, like Upvolt, like, is really, really cool. I mean, like, you have a means now of, you will have a means of creating like a script that like could be informed, right, of certain a thing that happened, right? So for example, say you have your vault and your funds are there, and you set it up so that like if more than a certain amount tries to get out in a certain period, you're informed by like a wallet that watches it, like a watchtower, some form of thing like that, and then like you can press the nuclear button, right? So like that vault gets withdrawn to a new vault, or some key like that's on a hardware wallet under a lake or something. Do you know what I mean? Like, so you have an out, right? So you can do a reactive security versus proactive security, right? Like you can sort of like, you can know and have time in a window, right, to sort of like get the money out of the difficult situation, right? I think, like if this is done like very well and the solutions are amazing, I mean, there's a possibility that like we actually don't need more multi-sig or hardware wallets in a way that we do now.
Yeah,
right?
or maybe it's comboed together, right? Like as an example, bring you back to that example where let's say I'm the evil attacker guy trying to go after you.
Yeah.
Now I don't know whether you've got a Duress pin or whether you've got a multi-sig or a seed XOR passphrase, etc. And even if I do get through all that, I don't know if you've got a vault hidden under all of that.
That's right. And the vaults don't even dox your UTXOs. This is so cool. Like you can still have privacy on that vault. And so one thing that was bugging me before about this proposal was that you would have to have like preset fees, right? Which in a 20-year sort of like thinking is like hopeless, right?
Right. The fees could be so much higher by then, etc.
It could be whatever, right? Like so you would have to have like a Anchor's
Output, I think, or something.
Anchor
Yeah, I can't remember the
outputs
term.
for like some very like another change to Bitcoin, right? For that to be able to do. But James gave us the news in the last episode, like that, like he figured out how to do that without.
Oh, right.
using
I
an
think he was
extra
saying
chain.
without package relay or
That's right,
one of these
yes.
mempool policy
That's
things
right.
that Gloria is working on.
Yeah. So that's really cool. So now it's like nice and tight. I think the discussion is going to probably be like fairly healthy because this is so narrow.
Yeah. So I think one other thing is maybe some of the other soft fork discussions get bogged down because something isn't perfect. And I think maybe we kind of have to take something that's not perfect, but it's a big improvement, like as long as it's safe.
My fear of that thinking is the slippery slope on that. I just think
Yeah.
I think we need to do our best to make it perfect. There will be unintended consequences, period, like you're saying, by not being perfect, right?
Right.
But as long as we can sort of put enough effort into trying to understand what the consequences will be as opposed to surprises. Mind you, it's just the timing of Casey with like ordinal inscriptions versus like Taproot and everything was just sort of like aligned. But he's an extremely bright individual. He would have, and he was a core dev, by the way. He would have figured out a way of doing this regardless, right? So this is kind of the mindset that I think is important. It's not a good example, even though it's the one that's like rubbing on everybody's face. Anyway, so like I think the discussion should be very, very reasonable. The problem, in my view, is going to be the activation, right? It's just soft fork. But on this one, it's going to be tricky because, we are all PTSD from activation. I am not a fan of speedy trials. I am not a fan of lot false.
Right. You'd prefer like a flag day sort of activation.
I want chicken, game of chicken where, like the network either is in consensus or isn't. I think we can do a better job at like displaying like a consensus. But I don't like the slippery slope of speedy trial. I feel like that gives an upper hand to the miners. For this update, I don't think it's a big deal. It's not like something that matters, but I think we should find a way of like keeping it consistent. But I think I'm in a minority. So like I think we're going to end up with a speedy trial again. I think a lot of technical people and industry prefer the certainty, even though it is giving the upper hand to the miners, it is giving some certainty to the network.
Maybe some of the large businesses might prefer speedy trial. I'm not sure, but let's see what the discussion is. See what people are saying.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we can get enough people on board with the idea of improving some aspects of Bitcoin, such as Upvault. Also wanted to get your thoughts a little bit on Nostr. So I know obviously you've been big into Nostr. I'm curious if you think some of the hurdles will be overcome. So as an example, how does this network deal with things like spam and DOS? Is it through using sats as the pay to play? Is
it's
that
already being dealt
or?
with.
Yeah,
you can use the global feed again, right? At least on demos. So it'll be a mix of many things, right? You're going to have pay to relay. You're going to have pay to join a relay. You're going to have relays of spam filters, right? So, it's essentially a censorship relay, right? Like that just gives you an updated list of things to censor, right? Which might be spam. You're going to have like filters, like the filter idea that I had for Will, which is only show me stuff that my people I follow post, but also show me things that the people I follow. So second degree that greatly expands the network, right? And it's kind of enough in a way. That might be all you want. What else? You can filter by like you can use some machine learning there to figure out some of the crap that people post. Because Nostr is censorship resistant, it's going to be a lot easier for spammers to spam. But also because we don't have a single vendor of clients, right? you're going to have a lot more work done in clients against spam. Like you can see that already. Like, I mean, Damos like dealt with spam faster than Twitter, right? Like Twitter is still having spam problems. Damos right now doesn't. And people are migrating. I mean, like, Zero Hedge is already on Nostr, right? Like, I mean, like,
oh, nice. I didn't know that.
yeah,
Yeah.
like
Okay, cool.
it's crazy how fast like people I think understand now that that like Nostr is like the lifeboat. Some are there because you already want to be there, like me, right? Like I'm tired of like Twitter negativity and like the current thing and all that stupidity. So I want my sort of like cozy safe space for now.
Until the masses come to Nostra.
That's right.
Let's see.
Right? But then
I mean,
you can
look,
have your
personally,
own
I'm
relays.
obviously, yeah, of course, yeah, and I'm supportive of Nostra. Like I have it as well. I think it's cool. I think I guess I just have to sort of see more growth and see it coming. And I think it is early days, right? Like it's extremely early days, and yet we still have so much advancement. But yeah. I think
to me, like this was sort of like an invention, like kind of like Bitcoin was. It's like a concatenation of many different things that sort of like arrive at a new paradigm, and has that vibe. It has like like very novel sort of ways of thinking about like data, and like like I'm done with this sort of like being like humble about its growth. It's like parabolic. And people are coming, and it is winning, and it is a lot better than Mastodon by like like orders of magnitude, and it's an engagement. You get more engagement on Nostr than you do on Twitter, okay, by the numbers. Jameson actually Lop did a little research on that, so like it is happening, and I think it's time for us to sort of like stop sort of like sort of humbling it down. It's like, no, it's like this shit's happening, and people need a new home that is censorship resistant.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see because I saw, and I'm sure you saw as well, a lot of Chinese people were joining Nostra because they saw it as a censor-resistant way to access.
Turns
content,
out that a
right?
lot of that was Chinese spam.
Right.
Once we dialed in some spam filters, a lot of the traffic died. But the traffic, the real traffic, is sort of going, and there is a lot of people from Hong Kong came in. Pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think one aspect that may be difficult for people to deal with is sometimes if you want to talk about freedom and censorship resistance, sometimes you end up having to deal with the people who are not so. That maybe these are people who are prickly, or maybe they're not that popular, or for some reason they've already been cancelled on the mainstream platforms, and now those people will come and use Nostra, and it's kind of the same idea.
Then you don't have to go.
Yeah,
then you don't have to go to shitholes, right? Like the Truth Socials and the whatever.
Yeah.
Like one of these sort of like 10 different pick your new censor, right? Like, and those places are horrible. I mean, like. Like it's like hive mind of that same exact type of thinking, right? There's no diversity of ideas. There's no discussions being had. It's just, it's just like people agreeing with each other on hating on some other platform, right? So it's like they're just posting a tweet and then just hating on it as if the world give a fuck, right? Like, so yeah, like this is different. This is like you can have different communities and different people sort of interacting. Which
and
is
that's a good point because you've got Gab and Truth Social and all these other ones, but like you said, they kind of are built around the personality of maybe a few people, and they just. I think they haven't really been able to really build a proper network effect. And then you've got stuff like Mastodon, which obviously you were hosting the Bitcoin hackers instance.
Which is garbage. It's garbage software. Like stupid protocol design. Like there is a reason why Mastodon never took off. Like it's 10 years old, by the way. The activity pub, like it's just terrible design.
Yeah.
And I was the censor. Yeah. I was the censor and benevolent dictator of BitcoinHackers.org, right? Like, I've been slowly telling everybody, like this next month, I'm killing it. I'm gonna point that domain to Nostr, and so be it. I don't want to be the benevolent dictator. Like, it's not cool. Plus, I mean, every single other every single other instance blocked us. Because we don't have like strict moderation. Like, so what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. Because then, like, the wokies get into it, and the point I think is, how do you have a technology that the wokies can't destroy? You know, and then maybe if you are a wokie, then from your point of view, you at least want to have a technology that you can, not get shut down from, right?
But
Because
even wokes don't want to be censored by China, right? Like, and
Right.
Mastodon is like one click away from being like censored. Oh, Mastodon is so bad that they didn't include quote tweet, right? Because it encourages people from dunking. Like, just the fact that you can do that is so dumb, right? Like, it's like it's the wrong way of thinking about like free speech and thinking about resistant information and like proper dissemination of information. It's the wrong sentiment to go with to begin with, right? Like, it's like I don't think they have the heart in the right place.
Yeah. So I'm hopeful that some of this stuff can get resolved, and as you said, maybe it's like a Nostr equivalent of Cloudflare. Maybe it's like a Nostr can have filters built in, like people who you follow, second degree or third degree connections, maybe, and then cutting out beyond that because you don't want to open yourself up to spam or DOS or some other kind of attack. And then maybe from the privacy point of view, I know one other criticism people have had is this idea that it's really important to use a VPN, otherwise you're doxing your IP. Because let's say I have my Nostra app and I'm connecting to 15 relays, all those relays might know my IP. So
yeah, but that's like that's an early day like low hanging fruit, easy to fix, right? Like, there's a million ways you can do this. So one way, you can just have clients cache for you the avatars and things that are leaking IP. You can have buffer relays. You can have your own buffer relay. You can spin up a relay that just is a client for many relays, and then you just read from your buffer relay, right?
Yeah.
There's like, it's easy stuff. It's a non-issue thing for this stage. The thing is, there's only so much time, right? And so many like people that can code. So, priorities, right? There is bigger priorities, like, for example, adding zapping, right? Like, so like that's like lightning tips in the thing. There's so many people on this that we broke wallets of Satoshi, like, more than once, because we were just tipping too much, right? Like,
right.
And a lot of people use that. So it's everything is on a to-do list and is very doable. It's just a matter of prioritizing what brings people, what helps people first, what helps the network bootstrap. There's a lot of bounties for it. I have a website called Bount.sr, so it's Bount, BOUNTSR.org. There's a bunch of bounties there for people to code things, and people are picking at it, which is really cool. I highly recommend it. I mean, if you want to be like a normie use of this, just download demos on your phone and like get working, like get tweeting there. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. I've been using Amethyst on the Android, and works pretty well for me.
Nice.
Still a little rough around the edges, but it is improving pretty quickly over time. So it's useful.
I mean, this thing's just happened in a few months. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like, it's just time. Right? Just need time to sort of like get the code in, but it's moving fast, really fast.
Yeah, it's interesting to see that, because at the same time, Twitter's having all its issues, and like all these other platforms are having their own issues. So, maybe that's what pushes people over to actually adopt.
I mean, the
use
stars
Nostr.
are aligned, right? I mean, the stars seem to be aligned, which is really cool.
Whereas I think there have been historical examples where people were saying, "Oh, this time we're all moving to Mastodon, and we tried it," and and I think that was happened maybe 2 or 3 times.
Yeah,
but it never really stuck. Whereas I think Nostrum has more of a chance of sticking.
I think the vibes are high, and remember, right? Nostr social media application is like a tiny little part of this protocol can be used for, right? There is a bounty of 12 BTC for people to rebuild GitHub on it. Right? Because you could transport Git commits on Nostr, right? And then you can have a decentralized, distributed GitHub, which is the social sort of layer, the business sort of logic for Git. I have a bounty for somebody to redo Medium and what's the name of that thing for newsletters? Substack. Like I wouldn't replace Substack and Medium with Nostr, right? There's a bunch of things there. Like you can do anything that is sort of like more in a broadcast like method. Like yeah, it's very, very cool. The conference is gonna be the first conference is gonna be in Costa Rica.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, I won't be able to make that just because it's clashing with Vietnam Lightning Con. But
wasn't that canceled? No.
The Lightning Conference in Berlin was unfortunately cancelled, but Vietnam Lightning Con in Da Nang is on kind of late March.
So a lot of stuff happening now. You know, as this space grows and things that are happening, there's going to be a lot more like date conflicts.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, eventually it'll be impossible to sort of make it to everything, right? We're just not quite there yet, but yeah, it's going to happen to that level sooner or later. And then so I guess kind of closing out. So I mean, we spoke about Q1, we spoke a bit about Coldcard and just Bitcoin security. I'm curious, do you see any other things we haven't spoken about, or any other trends or directions that you think the industry or things should go from a Bitcoin security point of view?
Yeah, I think hardware wallets are becoming a lot more sophisticated, and sort of like we're understanding the problem better. The NFC stuff is growing. There's slowly more wallets doing NFC, which is great for consumers, like more normie use of things. I think we're gonna see things like inscriptions and ordinals be like sort of like the next biggest thing that happens in Bitcoin. There is a massive amount of demand for that stuff. Like me liking or not liking it, it's irrelevant. The shitcoiners are running now like Bitcoin nodes and full nodes because they want their inscriptions there, right? So that's an interesting sort of funnel, right, for Bitcoin. You made the blocks bigger, now have them full. Another thing too is that this quiets out a little bit of the security budget FUD too, which is funny. What else? The Q1 thing, before I forget, because the demand was bigger than we thought for the reservations, get your reservation in if you want, because if it keeps on going like this, we might cap it. And then you won't be part of the
first round of Q1 recipients.
Yeah. That's right.
Well, I've ordered mine. I'm definitely looking forward to playing around with it. So yeah, thanks for joining me, NVK. Listeners, make sure you follow NVK. I'll put the links in the show notes and get the stuff over at coincard.com. And I was going to say your Twitter, but no, let's follow NVK on Nostr. I'll put a link for that in the show notes.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Livera.
Thanks. Okay.